A nurse tries to remove the ring from a dead young woman's finger, but suddenly the hand closes and she panics. It is early morning and the hospital corridor is too quiet. Only the sound of Doña Lorena's footsteps breaks the silence. One shuffling step followed by another more firm one. She is wearing her old robe, a little loose around the shoulders, and carrying a metal tray that moves slightly with her steps to the end of the corridor. The door of the mortuary has a worn, dull sign, as if even the metal felt the weight of those who enter there. Lorena pushes the door open with her hip. She is used to the sound of metal scraping against the handle. Inside, the light is cold, bluish, almost cruel, and the smell is a mixture of disinfectant and an emptiness that only those who work with death know. She takes a deep breath, or tries to. The air there seems heavier. On the right, on the steel stretcher, the body that has just arrived. Ana Sofia Mendoza, a 43-year-old woman covered up to her neck with a white sheet, her fingers stiff in the air, her skin still retaining a tone, a remnant of life that will not return. Lorena approaches carefully, uncovers the hands, takes the clipboard with papers, and speaks softly, as if she doesn't want to disturb Ana Sofia. Let's go through the protocol. Yes, it will be quick. I promise to be gentle. She always speaks with respect because, for her, everybody there has a story, and even if she doesn't know what it is, she feels it. She feels as if the walls of the morgue hold echoes of those stories. Lorena crouches down, her fingers trembling a little from the cold, and perhaps from something else. She carefully takes the deceased's left hand. The fingers are cold and stiff, but there she sees a simple silver ring without a stone, worn at the edges, but it has something that makes time stand still for a moment. Lorena frowns, her gaze fixed on that ring, as if the world had suddenly fallen silent. She doesn't understand why, but she feels a pressure in her chest and suddenly stops breathing, not out of fear or fright, but because of a sensation that slowly rises and fills her whole body, as if that ring were saying something, as if she had seen it before, as if an old, dormant alarm were ringing again deep within her memory. She swallows hard, her face turning pale for a second. The metal tray rattles with the slight tremor of her hand. She doesn't take her eyes off the ring, and for the first time in many years working at the mortuary, Lorena feels something she can't explain, but she feels it. She feels it very strongly. She places the metal tray next to the body and puts on her gloves. The contact of the glove with the colorless skin of the dead woman always makes her feel a little sadness, because even though the years go by, Lorena never gets used to that part. She looks at the ring again. She can't get it out of her head, but she has to follow protocol. Inventory, collection of belongings. Every object that is removed is carefully stored with a number and a photo. Everything has to be done right out of respect, by law, for dignity. She carefully takes Ana Sofia's hand. The ring is on the ring finger of her left hand. Worn, simple but firm, very firm. Lorena tries to turn it slowly, but nothing happens. The metal seems stuck to the skin. Maybe it swelled after death. That happens. But even so, something bothers her. She tries again, making small movements, careful not to hurt anyone who is already gone, but she acts as if she could. The ring doesn't move, and Lorena sighs deeply. She looks at the stretcher, looks at the woman's face, and speaks softly, almost in a whisper. "Excuse me, ma'am. I just want to remove this ring. I'm sorry." She tries again, this time with a little saline on her fingers to see if it will slip off. The hand is cold and stiff, but it feels strangely tense. The fingers are not as loose as they should be, as if they were grasping something that cannot be seen. Lorena stops for a second and looks around. The silence of the mortuary weighs heavily again. She feels a lump in her throat that has no name. Maybe it's fatigue, maybe it's the cold, or maybe it's just that kind of presence that no one can explain. but some people feel. Lorena takes a deep breath and carefully takes the woman's hand again. The fingers are still cold and stiff, but she persists. She uses a little more saline, squeezes slowly, and turns the ring with her thumbs, feeling the slight friction against the pale skin. This time it moves about 1 millimeter, just a little, almost nothing, but enough for her to think, now. Without meaning to, she holds her breath for a second. Then, just as she pushes to turn the ring once more, the woman's hand moves. It looks like the fingers wanted to close. The shock is immediate. Lorena lets out a muffled scream. The metal tray falls to the floor with a crash. Tweezers, scissors, everything jumps onto the white tile floor and scatters with a cold, sharp noise that echoes in the amphitheater like a slap. She instinctively steps back and presses herself against the wall, her hands trembling in the air, not knowing what to grab. Her chest rises and falls uncontrollably. Her face loses color, her eyes fixed on that now closed hand. She looks around. No one. Total silence. She whispers, almost breathless, "My God, what was that?" The tray is on the floor, overturned. But was it before or after? She tries to remember. Did she drop it because her hand closed? Or did her hand close because she dropped it? Lorena slowly bends down and picks up the fallen instruments, her eyes returning all the time to that hand. She approaches again. The woman's fingers are now more closed. It shouldn't be possible. No, not like that. Not with a body that has been stiff for some time. She doesn't dare to touch it again. She stays there, very still, her heart pounding in her ears, her forehead damp, a chill running down her back, the kind that starts in the stomach. And silence fills the room again, but it is not the same silence. It is a heavy, alive, dense silence, as if something invisible were there, and Lorena, her gaze fixed on that hand, wonders, without the courage to say it out loud, did she really die? Or is there still something there, something that does not want to leave? The air feels colder now. Her heart beats unevenly, not only because of the shock, but because of something else, something deeper, an old feeling buried many years ago. She closes her eyes for a moment and suddenly returns to the past, 22 years ago. It was also dawn, another cold light, another door opening with a creak, but this time it wasn't the amphitheater. It was the door of the Church of San Miguel. At that time, Lorena was still young and worked shifts as a volunteer at the parish. It was a rainy night. There were hardly any people on the street, and someone who to this day remains unknown left a shoebox on the front bench of the church. Inside was a newborn baby. The cry was weak, almost inaudible. The baby's skin was cold, slightly purple at the fingertips, wrapped only in a thin blanket, and next to her, on the edge of the blanket, tied with a piece of ribbon, a ring. Lorena remembers it as if it were today, the discreet shine without a stone, half bent, and with a small cut on the inside, as if the ring had been broken on purpose, half of something. She bent down and took the baby in her arms, with an inexplicable care. The warmth of her own skin was the first thing she gave her. Then she ran to the hospital with her heart in her throat. That night never faded from her memory. Now she stands again under the cold light, looking at the ring on the woman's hand on the stretcher. She sees it. It's the same type of ring, same design, same worn shine, same little cut. Her throat closes up. Lorena holds back the tears, but her eyes are already full of them. She approaches slowly, takes the cell phone with trembling hands, takes several photos of the ring, every detail possible, zooms in, rotates the image. The cut is there, small but present. Then she tries again to remove the ring with great care, turning it slowly, but the ring won't come off. Lorena looks at the woman again and remains silent for a moment, only the sound of her heart in her ears and in her head. The question begins to pound. What if that ring is the same one? And what if that woman is part of what was left unanswered that night, so many years ago? She doesn't even realize when she has the cell phone in her hand. She unlocks it and searches through her contacts with trembling fingers. The name appears, as if it had always been there. Waiting, Lorena hesitates, looks once more at the woman on the stretcher, and presses the green button. The phone rings once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th ring, someone answers. Hello. The voice is low and hoarse from sleep. Lorena speaks in a desperate whisper. Carmen, I'm sorry for the hour. It's urgent. On the other end, there is a short silence. Did something happen? Are you with Valeria? More silence. Yes, she's asleep here. Why? Lorena closes her eyes and takes a deep breath. She hardly has the courage to speak. Carmen, do you remember when she was a baby in the church with the shoebox? Of course I remember, Lorena. How could I forget the day I met her? Carmen, I need you to come with Valeria. Her friend's voice changes tone and becomes alert. But what happened? Did you discover something? Lorena hesitates again, looks at the ring, swallows saliva. I don't know how to explain it. I just need you to come, please, right now, right now. On the other end of the line, Carmen is silent for a few seconds, then says, I'll be right there. The call ends. Lorena stands still holding the cell phone in her hand, her fingers cold, her heart racing. The hospital hallway seems longer than ever. She still doesn't know what she's going to say, but something inside her screams, Valeria has to see this, because that girl wasn't found by chance. She was handed over, and maybe they were calling her back. The clock read almost 4 a.m. when Valeria walked through the door of the morgue, her eyes still swollen from sleep, her hair pulled back in a hurry, and a look of fear on her face as she tried to understand what justified such an urgent and mysterious call. She walked over to where Lorena was standing. Carmen followed behind, quieter than ever. Valeria looked at the stretcher with respect. She didn't seem afraid, but rather a strange, silent, almost heavy curiosity. Lorena took a deep breath, stepped aside, and pointed with her eyes. Look at this ring here. Valeria leaned over. The cold light hit the metal, which shone with a dull, almost shy reflection, the same kind of shine she had known since she was a little girl. Before she could think, Valeria's hand went to her chest and took out the little necklace she had always worn there. Hanging from a thin chain, there was a ring. She removed it slowly and looked at the object in her hands, as if she were seeing it for the first time. Her thumb caressed the side, and then she said softly, without taking her eyes off the necklace, I've worn this for as long as I can remember. My mom said it was with me when they found me. Lorena swallowed. Her eyes went from the necklace to the ring on the woman's finger on the stretcher, and then back to the necklace. I can see it, Valeria said. She took off the necklace and handed it to Lorena. Lorena held the 2 rings very carefully, one still on the woman's hand, the other loose, lightened by the years, hanging on the chest of a girl who grew up without knowing where it came from. She turned Valeria's ring, looked at it, and then saw it. A small, thin cut, almost impossible to see, but there it was, exactly opposite the cut on Anna Sophia's ring, as if someone one day had broken a single wedding ring in 2. Lorena put the 2 together. The cut on one side fit perfectly with the one on the other. My God, whispered Valeria. She came closer and looked at it closely. It's the same. It's identical. Her hands began to tremble. Carmen put her hand on her shoulder, trying to support her, but Valeria couldn't take her eyes off the rings, now united like pieces of a puzzle that had remained incomplete for 2 decades. This was my mom's. Lorena didn't answer because she didn't need an answer. It was already there in the silence, in the touch, in the fit, in the time that had passed, but had not erased the 2 that were now together again. The silence in the room was so loud that you could hear your own heartbeat. Valeria kept looking at the two rings now joined together, as if she didn't want to accept what she was beginning to understand. Her eyes were filled with tears. Her young face tried to hide an old fear, a fear without a name, but one that had lived inside her for a long time. She slowly looked up and asked in a very low voice, almost without sound, "Who is that woman?" Lorena closed her eyes for a second, as if those words weighed more than the world. When she opened them, she swallowed hard. The answer came out low but firm, with the care of someone who knows they are about to change a life. "Maybe your mom." Valeria didn't move. She just stood there, her body still, but inside, everything was falling apart. Carmen took a step toward her, but respected her space. This was between Valeria and the past. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. Lorena, with an urgency she didn't even understand, took a deep breath, grabbed more saline solution, returned to the stretcher, looked at Ana Sofia with a mixture of respect, fear, and hope, slowly reached out her hand to hers, touched her gently, drops of saline solution falling from her fingers, and the moment she tried to turn the ring again, the fingers moved softly, but clearly, like a reflex or a sign. Lorena froze. Her breath failed for a second. She opened her eyes in surprise, and then slowly, the corner of the woman's eye trembled, almost imperceptibly, almost invisibly, but it happened. "My God," she whispered. Her hand went straight to the emergency button and pressed it hard. "Doctor, come here now!" The sound of the low alarm was heard in the amphitheater, but inside, the loudest noise was the questions exploding in Valeria's chest. If that woman was really her mother, then why now? Why there? Why like this? Was there still time? Could she still say everything she had never said? Lorena stood still, feeling her blood rush faster, as if something very old and very important finally wanted to wake up. The red button flashed continuously. The sound of the alarm was soft, but enough to make everyone's heart beat faster in the room. The door to the amphitheater slammed open, and Dr. Esteban Herrera entered, wearing a white coat, his hair disheveled, his glasses slightly crooked, the serious face of someone who has seen too much and no longer believes in almost anything. Lorena pointed to the woman on the stretcher with an agitated voice. She moved her hand, and her eye responded to the touch. Dr. Esteban did not approach immediately. He crossed his arms, took a single step, and said in a tone of disbelief, "Post-mortem reflex is common. The body responds involuntarily. It's not life. That's not what it was," Lorena insisted firmly. "It was something else. Look at her closely. Look at the ring. Look at the signs. Please do the hypothermia test." He snorted. He didn't want to waste time, but he saw Valeria's eyes, and that look said a lot. It said everything. Esteban approached the stretcher, touched her fingers, checked the color of her skin, took her temperature with a small sensor, then looked at the portable oximeter screen. The line was almost straight, but with a little noise. It was enough. He raised his hand and called the nurses on the intercom. "Support team, autopsy room, code blue. Prepare hypothermia resuscitation protocol." The stretcher released with a sharp click, and the wheels began to turn on the white floor. Lorena ran alongside, pushing with them. Valeria followed hurriedly, her eyes filled with tears, breathing heavily with each step. It seemed as if something inside her was also running or fleeing. "Please," she said, almost tripping. "Please don't let her go again. Not now." The hallway filled with sounds. Wheels rolling, quick footsteps, a distant beep, stifled crying. The elevator opened with a metallic sound. Inside, the noise was low, but the tension remained. Dr. Esteban didn't take his eyes off the signs. Lorena held onto the side of the stretcher, as if it were an anchor. Valeria cried silently, her hand on her chest, clutching her necklace and squeezing it tightly. The double emergency doors opened with a bang. The white light hit her eyes directly. Everything was moving. Everything was rushed. but it was a careful, silent rush, as if death itself had stopped at the door and said, "Wait, not yet." The time had not yet come. The medical team was already waiting, fast, trained, precise. One of the nurses prepared the warm IV, another connected the monitor. Anna Sophia's body was moved from the metal stretcher to the hospital bed. A thermal sheet was opened like a blanket of hope. An oxygen tube was carefully placed over her face. The sound of the monitor filled the room, an almost straight line with small, unstable waves. It was noise, but it was also a breath of possibility. Dr. Herrera said nothing, just looked at the data and gave quick orders with his head. His eyes no longer showed only doubt. There was something else, a question, a respect that was beginning to grow. Lorena stood in a corner, unable to look away. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not cry. It was another kind of emotion, a pain mixed with relief, as if something was finally beginning to show. The patient's bag was on the simple cloth table. Lorena instinctively opened it and took out the documents. Some folded papers, a handkerchief, and among them a yellowed piece of paper with a worn edge on. It was a sheet of ordinary notebook paper, folded many times. When Lorena unfolded it, she saw that it was handwritten in shaky letters, as if it had been written while crying. She read silently, "Forgive me. It wasn't a lack of love. I couldn't hold on." Lorena's heart tightened, as if it were being crushed. That woman had not left her daughter out of malice. She had not abandoned her. It was not coldness. It was not a decision. Lorena sat down slowly, still holding the paper in her hand. She looked at the woman in the bed, wrapped in a thermal blanket, connected to cables, being brought back to life, and thought about everything that letter did not say, about everything that had been trapped in her eyes for 22 years. Valeria stood further back, watching everything, her hand clutching the necklace, her breathing uneven, and a question began to form, still shapeless, still painful. What if my mom never wanted to leave me? The answer still floated in the air, but now it didn't seem so far away. The monitor continued to show small variations, timid oscillations, almost invisible, but there for those who believe that every millimeter of line was an opportunity to pull someone back. Dr. Esteban broke the silence without taking his eyes off the signs. If there is hypothermia, there may still be minimal activity, but she is in a coma. The word hung in the air like a blow. Coma. Valeria did not understand immediately. She had to repeat it softly, as if testing the word to see if it hurt less. Coma. She turned to the doctor. Is she going to wake up? He hesitated, as if he did not want to lie, but also did not want to kill a glimmer of hope. Before he could answer, Lorena approached. Her voice was firm, full of life, though fearful. As long as there are signs, we'll stay here. Valeria looked at her and found the strength she needed, like a refuge. Lorena clutched an old envelope in her hands. She had taken it from Anna Sophia's bag. Inside were yellowed sheets of paper that smelled of time and stored pain. She opened it carefully and took out a series of newspaper clippings, folded thin, fragile paper, but with words that carried weight. Valeria read along. Mendoza family seeks baby left at San Miguel Church. Her heart stopped. The news was old, dated the same year they found her. The small letters told a short but clear story. A young mother, Ana Sofia Mendoza, disappeared from the hospital after giving birth. Days later, the family began searching for a baby left at a church in Chicago. They described the blanket and the box, even the ring. Lorena whispered, "They looked for you." Valeria covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes filling with tears, her chest rising and falling uncontrollably. "They looked for me, didn't find me." Lorena shook her head slowly. That pain was too old to be in a hurry. They didn't find you. The adoption system was a mess. They took you without a name, without an origin. The information was lost. Valeria closed her eyes, a tear falling effortlessly. It was as if an old hole inside her was filling up, and at the same time hurting more. Then she tried to find me. Lorena nodded. She tried, and she wasn't the only one. Valeria pressed the clippings against her chest, as if she could feel for the first time a love she never knew. The love of the one who searched. The love of the one who was lost trying to find. The sound of the monitor was the only movement in the room. Rhythmic, soft, almost like the sound of a breath that doesn't want to go away. The light from the ceiling reflected in Valeria's tear-filled eyes. She was still holding the newspaper clippings as if they were part of her own heart. Lorena was silent for a few seconds. Her mind went back to that day, the one she never forgot. It was nighttime, it was cold, an icy wind swept through the streets of Illinois, and that night, inside St. Michael's Church, she found the box, a simple shoebox with a thin blanket inside, and there was a tiny baby. Her little fingers were purple. She was barely crying, barely breathing. Lorena knelt down at that moment, as if instinct spoke louder than any rule. She took the baby in her arms and held her close to her chest. She couldn't stop shaking. She wrapped her up more tightly and hugged her. She ran, but it was there, as she closed the box, that she saw it tied with a worn ribbon. There was a small silver ring, worthless, but with a mark on the inside. A cut, as if someone had broken it in two. That ring had come with the baby. That ring was all she had from her past. Lorena returned to the present and looked at Valeria with a firm expression. She brought the two rings together, the one on the woman's finger and the one Valeria wore on her necklace. There was silence. She put them together, and the cuts on the inside met and joined like pieces that were born together, and inside appeared the inscription that no one had been able to read completely. For Valeria, forgiveness, 2003. Valeria covered her mouth with both hands. The tear fell before she could stop it. Her body trembled softly, as if all this were too unreal to be happening. Lorena placed the joined rings in the small acrylic window of the ICU. "Look at her," she said softly. "Talk to what is yours." Valeria took another step, and when she rested her forehead on the glass, it was as if time had bent, as if that glass separated two lives that could never see each other in the eyes. She spoke softly. "Mom, I'm here." She closed her eyes tightly. "I forgive you." She opened them slowly, her voice broken. Come back, even if it's just to hear me." The sound of the monitor continued, but the silence inside her began to break. The glass in the ICU fogged up with Valeria's heavy breathing. Her forehead was still pressed against it, her eyes closed. The words stuck between her teeth. The silence in the room was so loud that any noise seemed sacred. Even the beep of the monitor sounded different now. Then a small spike appeared on the screen, a slight rise like a little mark in the heart of the straight line. Dr. Herrera, who was watching from afar, took a step forward. He had barely finished speaking when another one came, a little bigger, almost imperceptible, but real. Valeria opened her eyes wide. Lorena held her breath. Carmen put her hands to her chest, and on the stretcher, Ana Sophia's hand contracted slightly, softly, but it moved as if to say, "I'm here." Dr. Herrera looked at the monitor, looked at the body, looked back at the screen. "It could be a reflex, or it could be that she's hearing your voice." He no longer had that hard certainty. He had doubt. He had hope. In the room, no one dared to speak. It was as if any sound could break that moment. Everyone held their breath. Time seemed stretched out, a silence full of questions, full of unspoken things. Valeria couldn't take it anymore. She let go of the glass, took a step back, and collapsed. She fell to her knees, her face hidden in her hands. The pain came out with force, as if she had been holding it in for years. If she is my mom, why did she leave me? Lorena knelt beside her calmly, saying nothing at first. Then in a low, firm, sincere voice, "Valeria, Listen carefully to what I'm going to tell you." She held her face with both hands, her eyes steady. The letter? The ring. That's not abandonment due to a lack of love. There are people who love so much but can't stay. We're going to find out what happened. Valeria cried silently, her whole body moving slowly, the tears falling as if they were cleaning away 22 years of emptiness that no one had been able to fill. The girl pressed the necklace tightly against her chest, and there, kneeling on the cold hospital floor, she began to understand a truth that no one had ever said aloud. Not all absence is by choice. Valeria was still on the floor, hugging her knees, when she felt two strong arms carefully wrap around her body. It was a hug she knew, an old warmth that had held her fever in childhood, calmed her fears in adolescence, and waited silently for all the questions she never had the courage to ask. It was Carmen. She said nothing at first, just stood there hugging her daughter tightly, the two of them on the floor of the intensive care unit in silence, only Valeria's crying filling the air. A new cry, different, fuller than before, more painful, more real. After a few minutes, Carmen stroked her daughter's hair, brought her face close, and said in a broken voice, "I tried. I swear by everything sacred, I tried to return you to your family." Valeria, her eyes swollen, slowly raised her head. "What are we looking for, daughter?" Carmen said painfully. "When you arrived so tiny, wrapped in that blanket with the ring hanging from it, I knew it wasn't just abandonment. I felt it." She paused and took a deep breath. "I looked. I spoke to the priest. I went to the police station. I knocked on doors at orphanages. I searched. But everything was confusing. The papers were wrong. The hospital lost records. No one knew anything for sure. It seemed that every clue ended in a dead end." Valeria just listened, her eyes red, her heart tight. "And we never crossed paths with them," Carmen continued. "Your mother, your grandmother. We were close but on different paths. And time passed." She hugged Valeria tighter. "But I never hid anything from you. I just didn't know how to tell you. I only had silence." Valeria rested her face on her adoptive mother's shoulder. Her voice came out softly, almost breathless. "You loved me like a daughter, right?" Carmen didn't hesitate. "From the day I held you in my arms. From before. From when I heard your soft cry in that box." The two of them cried together there on the cold hospital floor, because even though there was a lot of pain, there was also a certainty that was taking shape. No one gave up on anyone. They just lost their way, and sometimes that is already too much love. The number was written on a piece of paper folded at the bottom of the bag. Lorena hesitated before calling the name written in small letters. Doña Teresa Mendoza. Her hands trembled as she dialed. The call was long, her heart racing when the voice on the other end answered weakly and hoarsely. Lorena could hardly breathe. "Doña Teresa, excuse me for calling like this, but it's about your daughter, about Ana Sofia." The silence lasted a few seconds. Then all she heard was, "Where is she?" Less than an hour later, the reception door opened slowly. A small, fragile woman entered, her body trembling, a cloth handkerchief clutched between her fingers. Her face was a mixture of fear and hope, like someone carrying a mourning that never ended. Lorena walked towards her. She didn't need to say much. She led the woman to the intensive care room and showed her the glass. Inside, Doña Teresa saw her daughter, her body still, wrapped in a thermal blanket, her face pale but alive. She put her hands to her mouth and collapsed. Lorena showed her the two rings, the perfect fit, the inscription. Doña Teresa cried more, her handkerchief wet, her soul heavy. "Is that Valeria?" she asked, looking at the young woman next to the glass. Lorena nodded, and then Doña Teresa approached the window, her hand trembling as she touched the acrylic. She stood there, looking at her unconscious daughter, taking a deep breath and summoning the courage she had stored up for 22 years. "It was after the birth that it started," she said, Her voice breaking, Anna fell into a shadow. She no longer smiled or responded. At the hospital, they said it was exhaustion, but I knew deep down, I knew it was more. It was too much sadness. It was a pain without a name. She closed her eyes, trying to control the images. 3 days later, she said she was going to pray. She left with the baby in her arms and went to church. She told me later that she couldn't think. She just left her daughter there, wrapped in a blanket with a ring hanging from it. She kept the other one. Valeria listened to every word, her heart beating fast, her eyes fixed on the woman she hardly knew but who seemed to feel the same pain as her. When she returned home, she was empty. We despaired. We looked for the father, the brothers, everyone. The police station, orphanages, the church, the priest. But she couldn't explain. She just cried, and everything was lost among the papers. Her voice grew quieter. Anna got a little better later. They discovered it was postpartum depression, but she never forgave herself. Never. Doña Teresa took something out of her pocket. It was a small cardboard box filled with small letters, folded carefully. Every year on her daughter's birthday, she would go to church, sit in the same pew, pray, write, and save them. She handed the box to Lorena and said, "If I ever find my daughter, I'm going to ask her for forgiveness." Looking her in the eyes, she turned to Valeria. "My daughter never forgot you. She never stopped loving you. She just lost herself." The silence that followed was as heavy as it was beautiful, because it was full of truths that had finally been spoken and a silent question in everyone's eyes. Would God give that opportunity by a thread of life? Dr. Herrera entered the room slowly, his face serious as always, but his gaze different, more attentive, more open. He walked calmly to the window of the intensive care room, like someone who doesn't want to make a sound in a sacred moment. Valeria, Carmen, Doña Teresa, and Lorena were there. No one moved, no one spoke. It was as if time had stopped, waiting for an answer that no one knew if it would come. The doctor stood silently for a few seconds, looking at the monitor, and then spoke without taking his eyes off the screen. He gave us a small but clear sign. The words came out slowly, as if afraid of breaking something very fragile. A slight twitch could be a neurological reflex. It could be an unintentional movement. But what matters is that there is activity. Valeria took a step forward. "That means she's alive." Dr. Herrera looked at her with respect. "She's in a coma, but her body is still responding. There's still some life left, and that means there's still a chance." Carmen covered her mouth with her hand. Doña Teresa started crying again, but it was a different kind of crying now. It was hope that hurt, that faith you feel without understanding. Lorena approached the window and bowed her head slightly, as if giving silent thanks. The sound of the monitor continued its rhythm, soft but present, like quiet breathing in the darkness. Valeria rested her forehead on the glass again, closed her eyes, and whispered with a broken voice, "If there's still a chance, then we'll stay until the end, because sometimes all someone needs is to be waited for. Even if it seems like there's nothing left, even if everything says no, life sometimes comes back for love." Time seemed to stand still. The room was silent, but it was a silence filled with something, the kind of silence that only exists when everyone feels the same thing at the same time. The sound of the monitor was the only movement, rising and falling slowly, as if calling someone back to life. Ana Sofia did not move. Her eyes were still closed, but suddenly her eyelids moved once, then again. Valeria, who already had her forehead pressed against the glass, felt it as if her own body knew before her eyes did. She looked at the woman's eyelids slowly, very slowly, just a little. 2 slits of light, and her still blurry eyes searched for something, lost, until she whispered very softly, a voice as weak as the wind. It was so quiet that only Valeria heard her, and collapsed right there. Her legs couldn't hold her up. Her breath caught. She pressed her forehead against the glass with her hands trembling. "Yes, here, Mom. Here I am." she said between sobs, almost unable to speak. It was crying with words. It was words with pain. It was everything she had kept inside for years coming out in 2 sentences. Doña Teresa pressed the handkerchief to her chest, her eyes closed, praying that this was not a dream. Carmen could no longer hold back her tears, and Lorena pressed her lips together, trying not to sob. But her eyes were full, because she knew what she was seeing was life returning. It was love, speaking louder than anything else. Ana Sofia moved her lips again. Forgiveness. It was almost inaudible. A sigh. Complete repentance in a single word. Valeria pressed her hand hard against the glass, as if she wanted to break through it, as if she could really touch her, and replied, crying, "I forgive you." The monitor rose a notch louder, then silence. But it was a new silence. A full silence that did not hurt, that did not weigh heavily, a silence that healed. That moment was more than a reunion. It was the end of pain and the beginning of forgiveness that had waited 22 years to be spoken. Valeria stayed there, her hands trembling, her face wet with tears, but her chest now rose and fell differently. It was no longer just pain, it was something else. It was as if, although wounded, she could finally breathe again. At her side, Doña Teresa cried softly. The woman who had once carried Ana Sofia in her arms now saw that daughter between life and death, and she also saw her granddaughter in front of her, so full of life, so full of everything she had lost. Carmen looked at them both, her heart tight, but calm. The girl she had raised with so much love was now facing her origins, facing the truth, and it was at that moment that Carmen could take no more. She approached, took Valeria's hand tightly, and with her other arm she pulled Doña Teresa closer too. "Come here," she said, her voice breaking. It was a simple gesture, but when that embrace closed, 3 women, 3 stories, 3 pieces of the same loss, something inside them began to heal slowly, quietly. Valeria cried on Carmen's shoulder, but those tears were different now. They were tears of cleansing. Doña Teresa rested her head on both of them, and there, in that human warmth that no tragedy can steal, generations touched each other. The mother who lost her daughter, the daughter who lost her mother, the woman who created love where there had once been abandonment. There, in that tight embrace, love did the only thing it knows how to do. It took the pieces and began to put them back together. The next day dawned gray. One of those skies that don't cry loudly but don't show joy either. A respectful, silent sky, just as the moment needed to be. Lorena was sitting in the hospital's small inventory room with the file open in front of her, the pen between her fingers, her face serious, her gaze steady. On the steel tray rested the 2 rings, now united, fitted together, complete. She took a deep breath, like someone who knows they are about to close a chapter. She took the file to the section describing the belongings and wrote slowly, "Pair of rings reunited, pair number 21, simply because that was how they had arrived there. Lorena paused for a moment, looked at the rings again, those halves that had spent years apart. One in the chest of a girl with no answers, the other on the finger of a woman who lived in the shadow of regret. Now they were together, and Lorena, without anyone seeing her, brought her hand to her own chest and pressed gently, as if giving thanks for being the bridge, the person who saw, who felt, who insisted, who did not ignore the sign at the wake. The atmosphere was one of respectful silence, simple, without luxuries, without haste, only people who loved and needed to close a cycle with their hearts at peace. Ana Sofia lay with a serene face, looking happy, almost smiling, her skin already cold, but without pain, as if she had finally been able to rest from the weight she had carried for so long. Valeria approached the coffin with slow steps, holding the 2 rings together in her hands. She took a deep breath, trembling a little. The necklace around her neck moved to the rhythm of her racing heart. She knelt beside the coffin, looked at her mother's face, and said softly, "Now you can rest, Mom." She took Anna Sophia's hands carefully, opened her fingers, placed the 2 rings together, closed them slowly, then rested her forehead on her hands, closed her eyes, and in that moment, there were no more questions, no more nameless pain, only silent, mature, complete love and the right goodbye. The one that should have happened from the beginning, but was only possible now when everything came together again. The room was empty. The wake was almost over. Only a few flowers remained next to the coffin, the soft smell of lilies and old wood. The sound of voices was gone, and the silence now felt more intimate, more respectful. Lorena stood near the door, watching Valeria from afar without interrupting. She held a folded envelope in her hands. It was neither large nor beautiful, but it contained what was perhaps the most delicate part of it all, the draft of the letter that Anna Sophia wrote but never delivered, which was forgotten at the bottom of the bag among loose papers, an old key, and the life she tried to hide. Lorena approached slowly. Valeria was still on her knees, her hands touching the wood of the coffin. She was no longer crying, but her eyes still carried the weight of the sadness that had just been born. Lorena bent down and put her hand on the girl's shoulder. Lorena said affectionately, "I found this in her bag, but I'll only give it to you on one condition." Valeria looked at her, that she only read it when it hurt less. She handed her the envelope carefully. Valeria took it as if she were receiving something too valuable to open at that moment. She ran her fingers over the paper, feeling the texture of the words she had not yet read. Then she turned to her mother, approached her, bent down again, and with a gentleness that only someone who has truly forgiven can have, kissed Anna Sophia's forehead. The kiss was long, silent, full of everything she had kept inside for 22 years. Everything she could never say, everything that only a gesture could explain. With eyes moist but now steady, she whispered, "I will remember the good in you." Her voice trembled, but it was a promise because Valeria did not want to keep only the pain or only the loss. She was going to keep what her mother tried to be, what was good about her, what remained between the lines, what love, though painful, had left behind. She did not know when she would have the courage to open that letter, but she knew one thing. Her story had not ended in abandonment. It had begun again with forgiveness. The days passed after the wake. The world did not stop. The buses were still full, the markets full of people, the clock ticking. But inside Valeria, everything was still moving at a different pace. It was as if she had been reborn, but as an adult, full of scars. That afternoon, sitting on the edge of the bed, she held a small silver necklace in her hands, simple and discreet, with an exact replica of the 2 rings hanging in the center, joined together, made with the same cut, the same fit, but in another metal, another time. She ran her fingers over the pendant carefully, as if talking to something she felt. Carmen entered the room silently, leaned against the door, and stared for a moment. Then she approached. "It's pretty," she said with a slight smile. Valeria looked at her and replied in a calm voice, "It's not to tie, Mom. It's to remember." Carmen nodded. Valeria held the necklace tighter. "I don't want to carry the weight of what was not, nor the emptiness of what was missing. I want to remember that in the end, we found each other, even if it was with pain, even if it was late." She put the necklace around her neck and left it there, touching her skin. "This now takes care of me. Before it hurt, now it protects me." Doña Teresa, who was listening from the door, took a step forward and said softly, "She would have liked to know that, my daughter." Valeria smiled, with tears in her eyes. The necklace moved gently on her chest, and with it the certainty that some scars are not meant to hurt. They are meant to remind us where we come from, who we are, and whom we decide to forgive in order to move forward. A nurse tries to remove a ring from a young woman who has died, but suddenly the hand closes and she panics. The sun was slowly rising behind the buildings, the warm light touching the sidewalk that was still wet from the early morning. Chicago was beginning to wake up, but there, at the hospital entrance, time continued to pass more slowly. Lorena stood next to Valeria, both of them silent, the gentle wind moving their hair. The little necklace with the 2 rings rested on Valeria's chest, as if it knew that now she could be at peace. Lorena took her hand affectionately and looked into her eyes without rushing. When we understand someone's pain, we judge less and love more. Valeria did not respond with words, but her shy smile and calmer gaze said it all. Now I ask you who are watching this, what would you do in Valeria's place? Could you forgive? Would you have waited? Would you also wear that necklace, not to hold on, but to remember? Comment below what you would say to your mother or whoever raised you. I want to know who stayed with me until the end, so comment with the phrase, "I also forgive," to move on. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. And this is important. Activate the bell, because there are more stories like this coming, and you won't want to miss them. In fact, click on the video on the screen. It's a moving story that has already made many people cry and think again about what really matters in life. See you there. Bye.